Okay then guys, today we're going to be taking a look at my Blood Melee Magic Hybrid. Now this is one which is probably not going to be overly popular, but it does have a one-shot mechanic inside of it. This is really effective on general bosses, but for me this is more for the fun factor. If you guys want to have a character which has a playstyle that is strong in numerous different categories and have fun with any which way that you want at any time that you want and blend them together, this is going to be the build for you. It is a very easy one to incorporate into your character, and generally you don't even have to worry so much about the stats. So with that being said, hopefully you do enjoy it. Like, subscribe, let me know in the comment section what other sorts of things you want me to do as far as these builds, and we can jump into it. Okay, so for this part we're going to talk about the method behind the madness of why my character looks like such a nutcase, but this works, and it really does work. So when we look at the equipment load that we've actually got, we've got the Rivers of Blood. That's obviously maxed out at 10. It's an evident weapon that you're going to hold on your second hand, although I do sometimes utilize other things. There are some other weapons that I will use, such as the Rotten Crystal Sword, which will have the same sort of effect, just with the slight Scarlet Rot build-up. Although we all know that the blood builds with the arcane increase right now is just a lot better. So right now we'll go for the Rivers of Blood for this build type. Then we've obviously got the Lusac Glintstone Staff, just because of some of the staff spells that we're actually utilizing throughout this build, and again with the Rotten Crystal Staff. Now I know there is a bit of a problem with the boosts on the Crystallarian sorcery for this weapon, and I'm hoping they do get this patched up, but this is something which has really frustrated me because this would be quite a high area for the build type that we're going for. And then we've got the Carrion Knight's Magic Shield, and again we've got that maxed out as much as we can without having to use so many of those ancient shards. The reason for all of this is quite simple. We'll get into those in just a minute, but they are all bound to either the spells that we've got and obviously still entailing the blood to give us that kind of hybrid melee magic feel that we've got going on. Next up, we utilise this one, and we're utilising the Preceptor's Big Hat. Now, we use that for a very easy reason, to be completely honest with you, and that's because it increases mind to the detriment of stamina. Now, stamina is quite important, although mind for me is something which is quite heavy on, mainly because we're utilising the magic from the spells, and we're also going to be using the weapon art from the Rivers of Blood, which is again going to utilise quite a bit of mind. Now, once we drop our stamina down quite a bit, we can use those lower level spells to kind of help regain that stamina up at the same time. This is something which is quite important, again, like I state, so that for me works very well, as it helps me get that mind up there a little bit more and make sure that everything I use the magic on is going to not deplete it down to the bare minimum. Next up, we've got this right here. Now, the reason why we're using this right here is just because it adds a nice little pose addition onto it. So we have got a decent level of the damage negation versus, say, something like the Royal Remains armor or the Fingerprint armor. And this generally is kind of laid out as a more heavier armor than the actual Fire Monk. Yeah, I know the weight on the Fire Monk armor is a little bit higher, but it does contradict quite well versus the numbers that these other ones seem to be putting out. So for me, this was quite a obvious one with the feel of how it actually reacted to. If we put this on here, you can see the difference on all of the damage negations and the vitality and poise that it gives you in the resistances as well is all just a lot stronger. So for me, this was a no-brainer, 100%. Next up, we have got the Lord of Blood's Exaltation. Now, this blood loss is in the vicinity, increases the attack power. This essentially is just going to make it so that it's a lot stronger when you are using your katana, the Rivers of Blood, because obviously when you're using the blood build-up, you know that the increase in it, once you do hit that blood build-up straight off the bat, is going to then cause extra attack power. We've then got the greatly raises the potency of sorceries for evident reason. We're using sorcery. This is all quite really obvious stuff. And then we've got the Marika's Sorcerer, which greatly increases attributes but increases the damage taken. So for this one right here, this is going to give you guys a increase in in quite a few things right here. We have got a increase in 5 for mind, we have got an increase in 5 for intelligence, faith and arcane. Now they are all areas that we want to focus on. Arcane for mainly the melee weapon, we've got the intelligence and the mind. The fact that it boosts faith is a little bit of a perk, I guess, but it's not something we're too worried about, to say the least. So the Marika's Sorcerer is something that we are pretty much guaranteeing that we need for this build right now. Next up, we have got the Carrion Falligreed Crest, which lowers the FP consumption for skills. So when you're utilizing your Rivers of Blood and you're using this skill right here, it is going to lower down the FP increase in the top left corner that you are going to use throughout that bar. So essentially just stopping you from having to utilize all of it on your Rivers of Blood, so that you can actually whack off those spells straight afterwards as well, without having too much of a bit of a hip fire in with that Rivers of Blood per se. As an overall, that works really well for the actual weapons. And then we've obviously got the Flask of Wondrous Physic, which I keep down the magic lane. Now this is what's going to give you the one-shot Comet Azure. With the Magic Shroud and Cracked Tier and the Cerulean Hidden Tier, this gives you that secret ability for the bigger bosses. So beforehand, you'd have the actual build which revolved solely around this, and this was something which everybody kind of used to be the number one big build meta, and you just utilize the flask and you can fire for a very long time. Now this is sort of like our side piece and is only used really for those bigger bosses out there, and a lot of the other build up enemies and bosses aren't really going to get the attention of this per se. So that is a more of a hidden attribute, and the basis of the flask is to be used once in a blue moon once you get to the bigger bosses. So for me, this one works very, very well. All of these things entailed, and having the glintstone scrap, so that when we have our shield out, we can pop a glintstone scrap and then utilize the utilize the Ash of War attached to that shield to give us 3 very powerful daggers that cause a lot of damage. Again, another insight to when you're going into a mini boss, you may want to pop these glintstone daggers and have them ready, and then once you go in, you will be able to slide off to your staff in your offhand, have your Rivers of Blood ready on the right hand, and you've got 3 daggers going in for that initial damage output. So as an overall, this is a very, very good appointment. When we look at stats, now I am quite high level. It is 253, and I know a lot of you guys are thinking, well, I'm never going to do that, and you're probably not wrong. But this is going to be a basis of I've only pumped the load into some of these attributes. Now you will notice that it is kind of an all-rounder. The main reason for that is well, I'm a YouTuber and every single day I try and get location guides out for you. But for the sake of this build video, the one that I actually utilize on a day-to-day basis, we have got the intelligence as high as we can. This is at a hard cap of 80, although you can run it from around a soft cap of about 60 would be the given move. I think myself, I actually have this at about 70, but with all the attributes, and 75 maybe, with the attributes from things like armor sets and things such as talismans and stuff. It gives me the boost up to the 80 hard cap. We're also going to be focusing quite a lot on arcane, dexterity, and for me, obviously, mind. This is going to be the biggest moves, as the intelligence dexterity build works really, really well, and having a boost on the arcane, which for me, I feel like could even be higher, and it would work very, very well, to be fair. If I actually ran the arcane a bit higher, maybe the Rivers of Blood would have a bit more of a damage output on it, and we'll have to take a look into that one in the future. But this is something that is primarily something that I like focusing on. We've got the arcane, the intelligence, dexterity, and then mind. Obviously, your vigor will sit at around a 40 standard. That's something that kind of has become a bit of a common knowledge per se. Running it at about a 40 is quite a healthy period of time, so that you don't die so frequently, whether you're in PvP or PvE. And then when we go on to things such as spells, some of them are detrimental, some of them are down to personal preference, and I'm not even going to lie to you guys. This is all dependent on how you play as a character, because this build character style works with a lot of different ones. So we have got obviously the Comet Azure. This is something you will need, because this is going to be your big DPS damage for your bosses. The Comet, this is a preference. So for me, this takes up a lot of FP, although it does hit pretty damn hard, especially when you charge it. It works as a very, very strong glintstone pebble, and this is one for me that I use on a day-to-day basis. Now this right here is the Shattering Crystal, and we have the Crystal Release, and the reason that we have those is for when eventually they manage to boost the attribute back up for this freaking staff right here. You'll be able to see it, there we go. The Rotten Crystal Staff. This one is obviously got the enhances crystalline sorceries, and this was one that I kind of want to primarily focus it around, so that I've got two different staffs there for two different attack attributes that worked quite well, but it's currently broken, which is frustrating. And then we've obviously got these Stars of Ruins. Now we all know that this came from the whole Lusat's questline, so this is going to work quite well with firing 12 dark shooting stars that pursues foes. Now this works really well with the Lusat staff personally, and the Renalia's full moon, because it's just really fun to incarnate yourself into a full moon and launch it at foes, even when it's not an incantation. It's pretty damn cool. But yeah, this is what I mean. So essentially you want the Comet Azure is going to be a given, and then beyond that you would want the Stars of Ruin again to be a given. Past that point, you want to make sure you're running crystals as far as when they actually start to work. Other than that, it is down to personal preference. As long as you've got the Comet Azure and you've got the Stars of Ruin, it gives you a good base for as far as damage. And that's pretty much that. That's the ins and outs and the rambles of what this thing can do. And it is not a strong by strong one by any chance of the imagination. And it does still one-shot bosses with the Comet Azure. It's still your main attribute for one-shotting big bosses. But the reason I utilize this build is because it's a nice hybrid. It is a don't get comfortable with any one style of play. You can do this in any which way you want and still be the strongest on the board. This for me, it works very, very well, especially on a fun factor. So if you have enjoyed it, smash the like button and subscribe, post notifications turned on. It'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much again for watching, guys. Appreciate your faces, and as always, I'll see you in the clouds.